Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and my guest this week is a fellow YouTuber who I discovered through Reddit of all places, and got some great AEW content and a lot of opinions that I happen to share with this individual. It is Rivenblade, and really excited to have him on here. Love his AEW videos, so thanks for agreeing to do this.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. And I just found out for the first time that it was actually through Reddit that you discovered my videos. I thought
Yes.
maybe you'd seen them on Twitter or something.
No, I saw it was well before we get into the normal, it was I found the Cody Rhodes video because I am always on my live stream, one of my main hills to die on is Cody Rhodes gets way too much hate, and you put a very, very well done video, and I'm like, okay, it's nice to see other people in this community, sticking up for Cody Rhodes, because it's like a blasphemy if you go, I enjoyed Cody Rhodes on Reddit or Twitter sometimes.
Thank you so much. I wanted to make something really succinct because I'd also seen the kind of deranged Cody hate that exists in some, segments, some corners of the interverse, the internet. So I just wanted to, give him his due a little bit and say, hey, hold on, this guy's not Triple H. If anything, he's maybe Cena. And I think the story they're telling with him right now, it's going somewhere. There's no way you have like a cape that long, on TV showing up during an intro and you're not turning. It's just not happening.
Right, exactly. So that aside, my first question is, how'd you become a wrestling fan?
It's funny because when I first started watching, it's just something that came on my television set. And I kind of have these flashpoint memories of very specific moments in like early 90s WWF. So I always go back to like 3 or 4 images that kind of are what I associate as kind of the birthplace of my wrestling fandom. And those things are Earthquake squashing Damien in the middle of the ring.
Okay.
I also remember Mr. Perfect throwing a football to himself and catching it. And I also remember Papa Shango making the Ultimate Warrior vomit going into their feud. And of course, the barbershop window, Shawn Michaels kicking Marty Jannetty
Yes.
through the barbershop window. So those things kind of stuck with me. And, friends in school were into wrestling as well. My neighbor was into it. His dad kind of took us to a live show in the early 90s at Cops Coliseum in Hamilton, Ontario. And that was the show where I believe Edge debuted before he was Edge. Like you had seen the stuff on TV with You Think You Know Me through the mean streets of Toronto. And that night, I guess they didn't want to debut him as Edge, so they called him Sexton Hardcastle.
Yes.
I was at that show where I think he used that name for the very first time.
I'm so jealous of you that you were that you got to see Sexton Hardcastle, because I remember hearing him talk about that was like his original name on the Indies, and me and my friends would always joke about like, oh, here comes Sexton Hardcastle. So the fact that you got to see a Sexton Hardcastle match like makes me jealous.
I remember him dancing. I remember him dancing jovially in the ring. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, that's kind of the birthplace of my wrestling fandom. And my neighbor, who also I watched my first wrestling pay-per-views at his house, basically. So I remember Mania 9 and Mania 10 were the 2 big ones that we watched together. And I think the Rumble too, when Luger and Brett went out at the same time and stuff like that. So
that's really cool, because Mania 10 was my first exposure to wrestling. Like
oh, seriously?
That is my first memory. I don't know if I watched it live, but I remember I actually did a watch along with my friends on this one. I said the things I remembered taking away from that is one guy jumped off a ladder, one guy was wrestling his brother and lost, but then the other guy came back and won, and that is Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart respectively. And that was like my takeaway of wrestling is I like this guy that jumped off a ladder, and I felt bad for this guy's brother who beat him earlier in the night, but yet didn't get the belt, because I didn't know how to process what was going on. But that was just, I felt bad for Owen Hart. So I guess
I don't think that's what they wanted you to feel, but that's actually a really good Mania to start with, right? Like
yes,
that's still
exactly.
considered widely as the best opening match of like any pay-per-view ever. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always up there in the discussion. I think rightfully so. That match still holds up.
Oh yeah. Have that match, and then obviously the innovative ladder match. Yeah, it's classic. And then of course Brett and Yokozuna was not bad considering what Brett had to work with. Brett put his work boots on that night.
Yeah, 100%. If I can just continue a little bit about
Sure,
my
go ahead.
wrestling fandom history, I guess. I did kind of watch through the not all of the Attitude Era, honestly. Like I remember, watching the NWO Hall and Nash show up on Nitro and thinking like, "Whoa, what's happening? Is this real? Is this not real?" And then you saw Hogan was on the news in Canada when he turned heel at Bash at the Beach '96. And I
Really?
watched a lot of the 97 stuff. 98, I think I was almost exclusively WCW. And the thing that kept me connected to wrestling was actually the Nintendo 64 games, namely like WCW NWO Revenge. I loved playing that 4-player, with my buddies. And I kind of dropped out of wrestling, I think around 99 or so, 98, 99, and would occasionally peek in. I just basically went off to college, university, and just didn't have the time, or just, my interests took me elsewhere, basically, at that time.
Gotcha.
And then I kind of peeked in when I heard, that WWF was buying WCW. And I watched that episode of Raw, when Shane walked out and everything. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is happening now. But I still wasn't back in it. And I kind of tuned out again until like 2007 when I heard the Benoit news. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really tragic. Okay, let's see what happens on Raw. So I watched Raw that night, when they did the Benoit tribute show, and then the details come out the next day, of course, of what really happened. And that's when I was just like, oh, this business is just, it's kind of gross.
Yeah.
I felt really disgusted is the wrong word, but just like this discomfort in the pit of my stomach just towards professional wrestling in general at that time. And at that time, a couple of years later, I was reading the Bret Hart book, found out, that one of my childhood heroes was always cheating on his wife and did some coke to kind of fit in with the boys and stuff like this. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this person isn't who I thought they were when I was growing up. And then one of my buddies took me to a Ring of Honor show in like 2009.
Okay.
And when I went to the Ring of Honor show, that was actually the thing that kind of made me click again and say, this is actually really fun. Like, why did I stop watching this? I guess at that time I hadn't really been to many live shows either, but just seeing wrestling live, there's something different about a different energy, to hear the chops, to hear the kicks, to see the splashes, to see people flying into the crowd and stuff like this. I was like, this is actually really cool. Okay, so let's see what's happening in pro wrestling outside of WWF, and I guess WCW wasn't around at that time anymore, but that was my only exposure basically to wrestling, was the big leagues essentially. So then I did some research online, and I'm like, okay, best wrestling pay-per-views of 2009, or best wrestling shows. And one that kept popping up around that time was Dragon Gate, Open the Historic Gate.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that show or
I haven't
not.
seen the show, but like I'm familiar with Dragon Gate and familiar with the buzz it was getting in 2009. So yes.
Okay. I think that was Danielson and Naruki Doi. Shingo was in there against somebody. It's a phenomenal pay-per-view.
Was
I
this
bought the
was this Dragon Gate USA or was it the?
Dragon Gate USA.
Okay,
Yeah, it was
so yeah,
Dragon Gate
okay, then I
USA.
have seen that show. Yes, because I have like everything from Dragon Gate USA up until like 2011. So I have seen that show. I thought it was a Japanese show. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Okay, cool. So yeah, I was blown away. I was like, this is amazing. And then I think it was in 2010, I ended up going to two shows that kind of like got me hooked again. And that was a Dragon Gate show in Windsor, Ontario. That was Pac's like debut in North America, I think.
I
I
have
think it
that.
was called Open the Northern Gate.
Yep, I have that
And
DVD.
oh, cool. And Brody Lee showed up on that show as well. So I got to see Brody Lee live once. And The other show that I went to in the span of like a month later, like me and my buddy who had reintroduced me to pro wrestling and Ring of Honor, in 2010, we went to Death Before Dishonor 8, which is widely considered like the best Ring of Honor pay-per-view of all time in terms of like consistency. So that was the one where Steen and Generico like were supposed to fight later in the night, but Steen came out right at the beginning
Yep.
saying, "I want to do this now." That had like a really bloody, gory ladder match for the tag titles. I think the Kings of Pro Wrestling were on that match. That had Kenny Omega taking on Christopher Daniels
Yep.
in a match that like I wasn't expecting much out of, but it ends up being, I'm like, that was actually really good, like just solid technical wrestling. And the main event was Davey Richards against Tyler Black. And that was the one that went, I don't even know how long, maybe 40 minutes or something. And that was the one where Richards ended it after Black beat him and saying, "Now you're a champion," kind of thing, like really giving the reins over to Tyler Black.
It's funny you're mentioning all the Dragon Gates and the Ring of Honor shows, especially at that time, 2009, 2010. Um, because for me personally, that was like kind of what kept me interested in wrestling. Because much like now, WWE was not at its best, um, and we were all seeking out alternatives, and that's how I found the independents. Much like kind of how we're finding AEW now. Um, do you have any particular favorite wrestlers that were sticking out to you at that time, and then like have subsequently gone on to be big stars in WWE or AEW now that you really were happy you connected with in that time period?
Huh. Okay. I would say it's yeah, I would say definitely okay, not in AEW, but Kevin Steen is someone who stood out. I don't know if it was 2009 that he was around. Yeah, that's right, 2010 with the El Generico match. So yeah, Kevin Steen definitely stood out as someone who could talk, who could do things that a man his size shouldn't be able to do around that time. And the Young Bucks, based on that first Dragon Gate show, I had never really seen them before, but the moves that they were pulling off and the attitude that they had really like baby face type offense, but it was clear that they were also playing heels a little bit when they were actually talking to the crowd. So they kind of stood out to me as, someone that I wanted to, or, a couple of guys that I wanted to watch. And of course, I mean, Shingo stood out in that first Dragon Gate show, and I've enjoyed following him over the years and seeing how he's developed. So, yeah, I would say those three guys, like Steen, Shingo, and then the Young Bucks as a tag team, all stood out to me at that time. And of course, Bryan Danielson, who
Oh yeah.
I missed his entire run, and now this guy is my favorite wrestler of all time. Now, like it used to be Brett, but with like him recently coming to AEW and seeing what he did with Kenny Omega and going back over his career and over the years, seeing what he did in Ring of Honor, that period where he got fired from WWE and the stuff that he did with Dragon Gate and his entire run up to Mania 30. He's just phenomenal.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, he's someone that is at the very top of the list for me.
Okay. Yeah, Brian's one of my favorites too. He kept my passion for like I said, especially during that time period, he really kept my passion for pro wrestling alive, and yeah, just a very very special talent, and I'm excited to see this new chapter.
He
Uh,
was literally the only reason I was watching and checking in with WWE during that time too. Because I did kind of fall into the like, oh, WWE is bad and sports entertainment is bad kind of thing when I got back into pro wrestling in those, 2009, 2010 years. And then I saw him pop up in WWE whenever it was 2013, I want to say, when he showed up on NXT, whenever that was. But yeah, he made me invested in his segments just because everything he was doing. I remember being so upset when I think he was on NXT doing those competitions and everything. And then he had that interview where, he said, Daniel Bryan is gone, but there used to be this guy named Bryan Danielson. Maybe
yes.
Daniel Bryan's over, but Bryan Danielson's just beginning. That stuff, I was like, oh, this is so good. Um, and then just watching his run up to Mania 30 was just really cool and frustrating at the same time in the 2 or 3 years before.
Okay, so real quick, this interesting point. You kind of said you were all like, I don't like, pro wrestling good, sports entertainment bad, and you kind of had that a phase that I think all of us who kind of follow independent wrestling and get on the internet sort of have. Was there ever kind of, or is that still kind of your mentality, or was there eventually, may not necessarily with the WWE company itself, but where you kind of like, you know what? I get sports entertainment. This is not my favorite guy, but I get his role and I get why they're doing what they're doing. Did you ever have that epiphany, or is it still very much wrestling,
No, no,
wrestling, wrestling? You know what I mean?
no. I view it now as just like, two sides of the same coin, essentially. And, some people prefer one over the other, and they are kind of the same. I mean, to say that there's no sports entertainment in AEW, I think would be a little bit, you'd have your blinders on if you were to say that flat out. Definitely, I prefer the style of presentation of pro wrestling that AEW has, starting out with a match, having a lot more bell to bell action. But, if people want to enjoy whatever they want to enjoy, I'm not going to like berate them for it.
Right.
It's just not my taste. It's one of the things that I've kind of tried consciously to do, at least online. I don't want to be a hateful, spiteful person just running down. I mean, it's okay. It's fun to criticize WWE because they're the biggest player in the game, and sometimes they do silly things. But I don't want to run down the people who enjoy it.
Right.
Unless they're really being not chaotic is the wrong term for it, but being aggressive about it or combative about it, and calling AEW is trash kind of thing. At that
Right.
point, you just kind of got to step away and ignore. But no, I mean, people are going to enjoy what they enjoy, and I definitely did have that kind of epiphany that you're talking about, where it was slow over the course of a period of years, where I'm just like, okay, I don't enjoy this, but I know a lot of people do, and WWE is never, ever, ever going to go out of business, based on like what their TV rights deals are right now, and
Right.
they're kind of like the mind share that they have in the public when it comes to pro wrestling. Like, people still associate them as being the name in pro wrestling, even though they want to call themselves sports entertainment. Everyone still
Right.
calls it pro wrestling.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, I don't hate WWE. I don't hate watch WWE. I just honestly don't watch WWE, and don't begrudge those who do.
Right.
How about,
Um,
I don't know, how about yourself? Like, I know that you were talking about going to a WWE show before we went on air and considering that.
well, for me, it's just like with WWE. Like the thing is, like I want to enjoy WWE. Like I don't like tribalism. I mean, even doing my own show, I would. Uh, AEW. I put a lot of eggs in the AEW basket. I mean, I was at all in. I've kind of seen this company from humble beginnings grow, and I put a lot of love and enjoyment and passion into following AEW. But that being said, like I want to enjoy WWE. I want to enjoy an AJ Styles match. I wanted to enjoy, Finn Balor and. I love Roman Reigns' character right now, and I enjoyed NXT. And there were sometimes I'd go live on my show, and I'd be like, "Yeah, NXT was a better show this week. I gotta give them that credit." And some people like that, some people didn't like it. It's hard for me to enjoy WWE right now, and like it's impossible. But at the end of the day, the end of the day, they're WWE, and there's shows coming up that I always enjoy from WWE, even at their worst times. That I'm probably gonna check out, and I mean, I would like to think that most AEW fans and even some of the wrestlers in AEW themselves would think, well, he's a wrestling fan and he's going out and enjoying pro wrestling, so more power to you,
Hey.
you know.
Yeah, exactly. No, for me, the realization was in 2000, I think 2014 or 2015 was my last WWE show, and that's when I kind of made the choice that, okay, this really isn't for me anymore.
Right.
um,
See,
it
for
was.
for me, it was the opposite because, like, in 2014, 2015, 2016, that's like there's stuff I didn't like, but like we were talking about Ring of Honor. Hey, there's Bryan Danielson.
Yeah.
There's Tyler Black. There's Kevin Steen. You know, AJ Styles is eventually going to be there. Sami Zayn, who isn't El Generico but wrestles just like El Generico. Well, he's there, and it's like, so all these things that kind of were keeping that passion going in that period we were talking about, they're now WWE guys, and while it's not their work that they were doing in Ring of Honor, Dragon Gate, or the John Moxley, I was watching him in CZW. It's not those sort of things, but it's still like, but here they are. Like, you want to see those guys that were that passion, giving you that passion. You're gonna have to watch Raw, and it made it easier, but then also eventually that got difficult, which transitions into probably my next set of questions is, um, how did you find out about the Elite and All In and all of this stuff that over the course of the last 5 years has exploded into the first like direct competition slash big alternative in North America in pro wrestling? How did you become familiar with all of this?
Sure. It's an interesting question because I actually did not watch All In. I still haven't seen all of All In.
Really?
Yeah, I know it's out there on the YouTubes somewhere, probably illegally uploaded, but I haven't watched the whole show. I think I've seen the Penta match. Was it Penta and Kenny that wrestled on
Yes.
that show? Okay. Honestly, I had been in and out of like having a New Japan World sub from I think from that 2014 period through I think like 2017 or something. I remember ordering like Wrestle Kingdom 9 on pay-per-view when Jeff Jarrett and Global Force Wrestling were like maybe going to be a thing.
Right.
But how did I find out about the Elite? Honestly, it wasn't until I think around like January or December, whenever they announced that like AEW was going to be a thing and that Double or Nothing was going to be a show, that I really started finding out about these guys. I had seen Hangman Page like in Ring of Honor, and of course I was familiar with the Young Bucks and everything like that, and Kenny and Chris Jericho. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. What's going on over here? Let's check out the show. So I paid the money for Double or Nothing, and I was like, holy cow, holy smokes, that was like the best pay-per-view I've seen maybe ever in my time as a fan up until that point. Like I'd never seen like, the Joshi showcased so well on a North American promotion. Um, Everything on that show, like Dustin and Cody, it was just tremendous. The crowd reactions, the wrestling itself, the excitement around that show was fantastic. So honestly, yeah, it was right around the time when they were announcing that, okay, we're going to have a show, or we're a promotion. We're going to be called All Elite Wrestling. There's the show Double or Nothing that's going to come up in May 2019. And hey, we're also going to be on TNT. And I was like, okay, I want to get on the ground floor of this thing because there seems to be a good energy about it. And I kind of like, you talk about having your passion and having your passion ignited by pro wrestling, and to have your passion keep going for pro wrestling, by being invested in certain wrestlers and things like this. And that's kind of how I felt around that time, because I wanted to love pro wrestling.
Right.
I really did. But watching Raw, watching 3 hours of Raw to have like, 40 minutes of stuff that I enjoyed to see, Kevin Owens and Bryan Danielson or Daniel Bryan, Tyler Black, it didn't feel like it was worth it in the end, like overall, as an overall experience. I still enjoyed the segments that those guys were in, but as a product overall, there was too much stuff that I didn't enjoy. You had to wade through too much stuff that was not for you in order to get to the stuff that was. So yeah, and then AEW, when they came on the scene, that's basically how I got into it, because it felt like it was a different energy, and it really was that Double or Nothing 2019 show that basically made me go in a way, haha, all in on AEW as a fan.
It's funny you kind of mentioned earlier how WWE is always like what people think of, and like they're never going to go away, and there's still things in WWE that you enjoy or you want to support. I use this comparison on the regular. I'm like, WWE is McDonald's. It is McDonald's. Um, I enjoy an egg McMuffin. I get excited when the Shamrock Shake is back, and I get excited during McRib time. But more often than not, if I want a good hamburger, I'm not going to McDonald's. But they still sell the most hamburgers, so you know, does it necessarily mean that since they sold more hamburgers than Wendy's or Jack in the Box or your local mom and pop shop that has amazing hamburgers, does it mean they have the better hamburger? Not necessarily, but it means that they made more money than all of those different restaurants. So it's just yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. And I can relate, except for I was suffering through some of those WWE shows. 'Cause I'm like, well, I really like AJ and I want to see him do good, or I really like Kevin, and I want to see him do good. Um,
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of I mean AEW does something similar where not everything hits and not everything is going to hit with every audience. And I think they sold themselves as that from the very beginning. You know, you had Cody and Tony Khan talking about wanting to provide a pro wrestling variety show, to have something a little bit for everyone. So, you know, I made a video talking about creative freedom in AEW and the different types of styles they showcase. If you want like a bell to bell banger of like modern indie wrestling, AEW does that. If you want like old school NWA brutal dog collar matches or whatever it is, AEW does that. If you want more WWE style, slower paced finisher fests, like AEW does that as well sometimes. And even if you don't like what you see right now, just wait 10 minutes or 15 minutes and you're going to get to something that you might like instead.
right. Um, so Double or Nothing was your jumping on point for everything in the first, we'll say, year of AEW. Uh, what was it that like really stood out for you that made you kind of go, this is the right decision? I'm on this train, and unless they really change the way the train is, I'm here to stay. Like what talent, what storyline, what was it that made AEW still your favorite wrestling promotion to talk about, to the point to where you now make YouTube videos about it?
I mean, number one, I don't think this is a shock, and I think many people say this. It's the crowd energy. The crowd energy at AEW shows to this day, when you watch Dynamite or Rampage, provided, even though they've been like, you know, watching wrestling for 3 hours at that point, the crowd energy is the first thing. Number two, in that first year, I really felt that number one, Jericho and the inner circle in those first 3 months or so of the show and the build up to his match with Cody, they really, really held it down. And when MJF was by Cody's side and you knew he was going to turn eventually,
Mm-hmm.
and you had that show where they were brawling around the arena with the Dippin' Dots and stuff. And I'm just like, just the energy of the performances of the crowd really just kept me captivated, kept me engaged. And then you had stuff, you know, on the very first Dynamite, you had matches like Hangman Page against Pac. I was like, what? And then you had Riho versus Nyla Rose, which when I go back, you know, part of the beginning of that match is was kind of a mixed bag for me, but it really came together in the
Oh
end.
yeah.
And a crowd can elevate even a match that seems like okay if you watch it on mute. And that was one of those matches where the crowd by the end was buying into it and were sold on it. So yeah, I really enjoyed Riho in the beginning. I really liked Cody's fiery babyface promos in the beginning. The lead up to like Revolution 2020, like Moxley and Jericho with stealing the cars and having his eye jabbed out. At that time, you also had Cody taking 10 lashes on live television from MJF, having the first cage match against Wardlow. It was just uh, a really captivating, interesting, unique energy around it that I loved and still love to this day, even though they've had some, dips in quality from time to time, and not
Right.
everything is for me and not everything hits. But overall, I think their heart is in the right place and that they are going in the right direction.
So, just like me, just like quite a few of us, your love of pro wrestling is ignited, and you think, I want to make a YouTube channel about pro wrestling. What exactly was kind of, if you could pinpoint it, the moment where you're like, I want to talk about this, or I want to express my creativity about in wrestling through this way. What made you want to get involved with YouTube, wrestling YouTube?
Sure. The first thing, honestly, was the AEW Elite GM game. So I was part of the beta testers, and the first
Okay.
YouTube video I made that was AEW related was just me kind of like messing around with the beta for 14 minutes. I still have that video up. I don't like it at all. There's a lot of humming and like, just a lot of pauses and things, and maybe that's still happening in this interview. It's something that I'm trying to work on in the live environment,
Oh, it's
but
fine, man.
but yeah, so I didn't really have a lot of time or video editing skills. So when I was playing the beta, I was like, how can I record this? How did people record stuff? And I realized I have an iPhone 8, and it said you can actually just record your screen. So I was like, wait, I can record the screen and just like talk in the audio portion of it, like talk into my mic, and that's it. That's pretty low effort. Okay, let's start with that. So I made some videos, related to Elite General Manager, just doing that, just recording my screen and talking into the mic. And then I started doing some show reviews where I would, watch the shows on my phone and take screen caps. And then I would eventually make a slideshow in my Photos app. And basically, those first few videos where I'm doing like show reviews and everything, it's just me going through my pictures, just swiping through and talking about each segment. And that's kind of how it started. And after a while, you have stuff like Tranquilo Club on YouTube, and that kind of stuff inspired me too, where I was just like,
Right.
okay, like this is actually pretty cool, and you can develop interesting narratives around pro wrestling and using pro wrestling to kind of ignite your creativity. And also being in the middle, not in the middle, but well, maybe we still are in the middle of COVID. I needed
Right.
something, and I was looking for something that would not only act as a distraction, but that would actually feel fulfilling, and that I was uh, scratching a creative itch. Like I needed to create something. And pro wrestling was the thing that, I still watch the most of when it comes to
Right.
my entertainment. And I was like, you know what? Let's give this a go. Let's download a video editing program. Let's pay the $70 for the whole year for it or something like that. And let's see if we can make this thing happen, because I've always enjoyed narrative storytelling and things like this. And I'm enjoying it so far. I don't love every video I make, but that's basically
Comes
how,
with the
how I got
territory.
going. Yeah.
um, what are your goals for your YouTube channel going forward?
That is also an interesting question, because I'm not 100% certain. I think I want to focus on making more video essays, while also not leaving behind the people who are subscribing to my channel because of the AEW Elite GM challenge videos.
Right.
So I've made 60, like I've done all 60 of the initial classic challenges that came with the game, and I made one video per challenge. And those have done, relatively well for me, not like on a massive scale, but I'm hoping with more people downloading the game over the course of the next few months and maybe years, those might see an uptick. um, so yeah, it's funny because I had a period where I would upload like 12 straight AEW Elite GM challenge tutorials or whatever, and then one video essay. I think what I want to do moving forward is, my favorite video that I've done so far is the one on the All Out show. I put a lot of time, a lot of effort into writing and editing the text for it, as well as the video. And I'm really proud of that video. And it's almost like no secret or no surprise that that has been my most successful video
Right.
up until this point. So I'm like, okay, not every video is gonna. Okay, number one, that show ignited something in me. I felt like I need to talk about this show. This show was truly special. It was truly monumental. And while I kind of had that lightning in a bottle feeling, I wanted to capture it and get it onto the screen as quickly as possible. So, not every show is going to ignite that in you, because not every show is a special like that. But I think what I'd like to do moving forward is definitely have more, like video essay type content, whether it's breaking down the Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson dream match, which I recently put out, talking about, storylines that are happening, maybe wrestler dream scenarios. I think somebody like Tranquilo Club, I know we mentioned him once already, but like he does a pretty good job of
Oh yeah, he's great.
kind of historicizing AEW and putting it in the context of what's happening in the pro wrestling landscape. So I don't want to just like do that. I kind of want to put my own spin on
Right.
AEW and look in different corners of what's going on. So yeah, that's kind of my rambly way of saying what I want to do in the future. Sorry about that.
Oh no, you're fine. Trust me, this is the Tangent and Ramble podcast. My live stream everything. That's just what we do. It's what makes us different. Is we could start talking about AEW and we'll be on, you know, 1996 WCW eventually. So that's all good. Real quick, final question, because I know you're a busy guy. You mentioned seeing Ring of Honor in 2009. This question just came to me. That helped reignite your love of wrestling. Is there any wrestlers from that card, or even the Dragon Gate cards, that you have not yet made it to AEW that you would like to see in AEW?
Oh my God, what's his name? The guy who's always running around after the 24/7 title, but is a joke. Akira Tozawa.
Yes.
Akira Tozawa. Yes. Number one, I would love for AEW to have an Asian star, an Asian male star. I think that's like, I don't think it's any secret that that's an area of AEW that's been talked about and criticized, the lack of diversity, especially near, I guess, the top of the card. So yeah, Akira Tozawa is someone who impressed me so much when I saw him live. The guy can get almost anything over with his screaming, with his yelling. He can
Right.
he captures your attention. So yeah, I would say him definitely. I would love to see him show up in AEW. Somebody else, you know, I don't know. It's kind of difficult to say. I mean, Kevin Steen is the obvious one, and it looks like that might happen at some point. So I would say, yeah, those two guys, Tozawa and Kevin Steen, would be cool to see in AEW at some point.
Awesome.
What about yourself? Is there someone that you see or that you would love to see come into the fold in the future?
Right now, I mean, I'd love for AEW to have everything, but like I normally say on my live streams, so for the people that watch those two, I'm beating the dead horse. But I'm kind of feel like they've reached their cap of male stars right now. Now I should say cap, but like let's give them room to breathe. Right now, everyone I want to see is just I want to see more depth on the women's division. I want to see Charlotte make the jump and be with her fiance. I want to see all the women in WWE that aren't getting utilized well. I'd like to see them go to AEW where they can be utilized well, where they definitely will be treated with more respect. They just need AEW. Just to me needs a little more depth. I want to see multiple women storylines on an AEW pay per view, not just the women's title match in a battle royal. I want to see feuds with the women's division other than just for the belt. That's something I'd like to see, and I feel like off the top of my head, I'm just saying Charlotte. I'd like to see her.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice, and I think this is something that I'm watching very closely as well, since especially since All Out and in the lead up to All Out is the treatment of the women's division. I thought that the Casino Battle Royale was the best one they've had so far,
Hmm.
and I thought they did a good job of like continuing feuds with Swole and Diamante, for example. I know that's like
Right.
on YouTube basically, but um, you had Jade in there with Layla, which kind of led to the Jade and Layla match on Dynamite. So I think they are going in the right direction and they're making the right moves in some cases.
Hmm.
And technically, there is more women's action on AEW percentage wise than there was before, just because of Rampage
Right.
being only 1 hour and having one women's match taking up like 33% of the show or whatever it is. Um, I hope they go back to Statlander, Riho, and Ruby Soho being a trio at some point,
Yeah, that'd be
because
cool.
that was really fun. I really enjoyed that, and I agree with you on the depth when it comes to the depth chart of the women's division. I feel like they need maybe like one or two more like centerpiece characters, but I also feel like Thunder Rosa is right there,
Oh yeah.
and I think they're waiting and waiting for the right time to kind of like make her resurface and challenge Britt for the title. So whether that happens at Full Gear or Revolution, we'll see.
Right. I know.
Um,
Kind of dating ourselves a little bit, but there's rumor and innuendo that AEW plans on introducing a secondary women's championship. And while I get what they're wanting to do with that idea, I feel like how about we establish some good storylines, and then once like it's like, oh hey, AEW has like 3 women's matches per pay-per-view, then make one of those the secondary women's title, and then bring that in. We talked about this on a stream, but that's just kind of my thing. It's like, bring the depth up first, solidify the depth, then you bring in a secondary belt for the division, and then it's like, holy shit, the secondary women's belt means more than the secondary men's belt. Like what I want to see, but you just got to get the depth first.
yeah, no, I agree with that 100%.
But I've really enjoyed this conversation. We could talk for another 3 hours, but I know you don't have that kind of time. But I'd love, if anything ever arises, I'd love to have you back on in some capacity. And if there's somebody that hasn't found your channel, the time is yours now to talk about it and talk about where they can find you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so if you just YouTube Rivenblade, Rivenblade on YouTube, as you can see in the image to this video, I do a lot of AEW focused content discussing the booking, some show reviews. If you're into AEW Elite General Manager, on mobile, I do some videos related to that. And check me out at Rivenblade2 on Twitter, where I am less rambly than I was in this interview because I have a character limit.
Right. Downside of Twitter is the character limit in some cases, but thank you so much for joining us. Definitely give him a subscribe. Great content, and if you hate Cody Rhodes, just listen to the video and give him a chance. That's the one thing I'm going to tell you. But thanks to Rivenblade for doing this. If you enjoyed this video, check out his work. Check out the rest of mine. I have content not just from the world of pro wrestling, but comic books, gaming, anime, all things geek culture. And I am also on social media, facebook.com/athleticgeeka9, twitter.com/athleticgeeka9, and instagram.com/athleticgeeka9. Or excuse me, Twitter is athletic_geeka9. Excuse me. And yeah, thanks to Rivenblade, and we'll see y'all next time.